According to Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharishi, who am I and the four yogas? This very process of the separating ourselves from these sheaths, which are extraneous and aliens to us, has been described in scriptures as yoga. Though in its strictest sense the word yoga simply means union, our earlier analysis has led us to call this process one of separation. In effect, however, these two, separation and union, are one and the same. What in Bhagwan Ramna's path to happiness has been so far described as a separation from what we are not is the same as that which has been called by all the Shastras which have prevailed in our midst up till now as union with God. If so, what is the reason for the use of these two contradictory words? The basic meaning which Sri Ramana, the Loka Mahaguru, gives us for the I is our true natural consciousness, self, Atma Bhava, whereas the basic meaning which has been given by the Shastras up till now for the word I is the consciousness I am this body, Jiva Bhava. Let us make this clear with an example. Suppose one man says, I have come to Tiruvannamalai, and another says, I have gone to Tiruvannamalai. Both are pointing out the same event of reaching Tiruvannamalai. What do we infer from their way of pointing out that same event of reaching Tiruvannamalai with the contradictory words, come and gone? Is it not evident that the first one is in Tiruvannamalai, while the other is not in Tiruvannamalai, but is speaking from somewhere else? Similarly, the method which is given to an aspirant who asks for a path to perfect happiness will be described either as separation, yoga, or as union, yoga, according to what is given to him or taken by him as the basic meaning for the word I. There is thus a difference between the yoga which has been taught by the Shastras and the self inquiry taught by Sri Bhagwan. Accepting the word understanding of ordinary people, I am this body, I have a separate existence as the base. The Shastras teach the four yogas, namely Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. First, act without attachment to the fruit thereof, says Karma Yoga. Second, do not love any other thing, love God alone, says Bhakti Yoga. Third, by separating yourself from God, you have degraded yourself into a petty individual soul. Go and unite with Him again, says Raj Yoga. Fourth, know God, says Gyan Yoga. In each of these four yogas, there must be an I to do action without attachment to the fruit thereof, an I to love God, an I that separated itself from God and that must now go back and unite with Him, and an I which was so far ignorant of God and which is now trying to know Him. Thus, in all these four yogas, the individual existence of an I in the form of I am this or I am so and so is indispensable. Without this I, no yoga can be performed. Then, is it not necessary, first of all, to find out who is this I? Does he actually exist? Does we have a separate existence? Is he real? Instead of frittling away one's energy in attempting to attain the much cherished Godhood through the four yogas. It would be easier, more important, and also best to know oneself first by scrutinizing who am I? What is my true nature or existence? Until and unless a doubt free knowledge of oneself is obtained, however much one may know about God by reading about Him, hearing about Him, or seeing visions of Him, doubts and miseries will be rising in one again and again because there is an I. It is only after accepting the conception that this I who is to perform the four yogas is a separate entity that the Shastras have given us the teachings on them. But Bhagwan Sri Ramana doesn't at all allow us to accept this conception because before opening your coffers and finding your assets, do not begin to wail unnecessarily, proclaiming, I am a penniless beggar. First set about to open your box, then only after seeing you can you speak about it. Similarly, before you inquire and know who you really are, do not unnecessarily make the wrong estimate about yourself that you are a limited and petty individual soul, Jiva. First set about to inquire and know yourself, and after knowing yourself, if you are still in need of anything God, liberation, happiness, etc., let us look to it. Then advises Sri Bhagwan, the I am the body consciousness, Dehatma Buddhi, is the individual soul. In other words, the nature of the individual soul is nothing but the wrong knowledge, I am the body. Though this insentient body cannot say I, that is, doesn't have the feeling I, and though existence, consciousness, such itself, has no rising and setting, between these two rises and I of the measure of the body, the I am the body identification, know this alone to be the knot between consciousness and the insentience, chit, jada, granthi, bondage, bandham, soul, jiva, subtle body, sukshma, sharira, ego, ahankara, this mundane state of activities, sanskara, mind, manas, and so on. This I am the body consciousness rises after sleep, exists and remains active till sleep, and again subsides in sleep. Since the body is insentient, it has no I consciousness. Hence, this consciousness, which rises as I am the body, cannot be said to be the body. Can we then call it self, Atma, since it is an I consciousness? No, we cannot. For rising and setting is not the nature of self. The nature of self is existence, consciousness, Satchit, shining ever as I am, without rising and setting. Thus, this consciousness, I am the body, which has a rising and a setting, cannot be said to be self either. It is neither self, which is consciousness, nor the body, which is insentient. It is a ghost like false appearance, taking the size of the body as its own size, being limited by time and space, being a mixture of the quality of the body, rising and setting, and the quality of self that is shining as an I consciousness, but at the same time alien to both of them and rising as a note granthi between self chit and the insentient body jada, chit jada granthi. This is the ego, otherwise called bondage, soul, subtle body, sanskara, the mundane state of activity, mind, and so on. The formless and ghostly ego, that is, it has no form of its own, comes into existence by grasping a body form. Having grasped a form, it endures, and having grasped a form, it waxes more by feeding upon forms. Leaving one form, it grasps another. form when sought for it takes to flight. What a wonder it is! Thus, should you know, the ego can come into existence only by identifying with the form a body as I. It can exist only by clinging that form, taking forms through the five senses for its food to live upon. It will wax more and more, leaving one form with which it had identified as I. It will catch another form as I. It will lose its existence and disappear only when it is sought for. What is it, or who am I? This ego, which rises in the form I am the body, is thus a formless, imaginary, and empty ghost like appearance, having no real existence, says Bhagwan Sri Ramana, presupposing the existence of a non existent thing and then wanting to get salvation for that imaginary I, you have to start and try to do so through the above said four paths of yoga. When your sadhanas themselves become a mean of giving life to the non existent ego, how can they destroy it? To do any sadhana except self inquiry, Atma Vichara, the existence of the mind, Jiva, is indispensable. For how to perform those sadhanas without the mind? To try to destroy the ego by sadhanas other than self inquiry is to be just like a thief turning himself into a policeman to catch the thief who is none but himself. Only self inquiry can reveal the truth that the ego, mind, or jiva has no existence whatsoever. So do not accept this ego, the truth of which you have not yet found out by scrutiny, deny it by giving no importance to its existence, root it out and burn it to extinction by attending to how or from what, whence it rises. Instead of doing so, if you accept it as a real inquiry, even before inquiring and finding out what it is, that is, before finding out who am I, it itself will be a fetter to you and will create many non existent obstacles such as lust, anger, etc., for you, and will then involve you in the aforesaid unnecessary efforts to overcome them. Thus says Sri Bhagwan, only if we first accept is self a thing which is not self does a need arise for a yoga to make efforts from there to unite with another real thing. Wrongly accepting a thing in this manner before scrutinizing it, it is itself ignorance, that itself is bondage, rather than first accepting a thing of which the truth is not properly known, bondage which is in fact non existent, and then struggling to get rid of the miseries caused by it. Would it not be wiser and more apt to inquire and find out, does it exist? What is it? Who am I? That thing. The mere inquiry, to whom are these defects, karmas, actions, vibhakti, lack of devotion, viyoga, disunion, and ajnana, ignorance, is itself karma, bhakti, yoga, and jnana. How? When thus inquired, I is found to be non existent, and hence these defects are also found to be ever non existent. The truth is then revealed that we ever remain as the defectless self. If we ask to whom are these four defects, namely that if not performing nishkamya karmas, that of not loving God, vibhakti, that of being separated from God, yoga, and that of not knowing God, ajnana, the answer will be to me. If we then inquire who is this I, That itself is truly doing the four yogas: Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. Because by thus inquiring who one is, this defective I will be found to be non existent. When this I is thus found to be non existent, these four defects will also be found to have been ever non existent. Our real experience will then be that we are ever shining as the defectless self alone. When this state is attained by the inquiry, who am I, who is then left there to practice the four yogas, sadhanas, and why to do so. Hence, the inquiry, who am I, is the essence of all yogas. It is the Mahayoga, the greatest of all yogas. Bhagwan Sri Ramana starts his teachings, who am I, taking self, the state of true existence, Sadbhava, to be our basic knowledge. Therefore, he doesn't at all allow us to accept the non existent ego, the sense of individuality, Jiva Bhava. But in other paths, that is, in yoga, instructions are given taking as our basic knowledge the sense of individuality, Jiva Bhava, false existence, which we have accepted with our priority scrutiny. That is why in the Shastras the process is named union or yoga. If so, some may doubt others. Are all the Vedantic Shastras wrong? And have they cheated the aspirants? Can Shastric statements be false? Or are we to conclude that Bhagwan Sri Ramana has condemned the Shastras? No, it is not so. Neither do the Shastras tell lies, nor does Bhagwan Sri Ramana condemn the Shastras. The fact of the matter is this: the absolute truth, which is the very life of the Shastras, has been rendered as if lifeless in the course of time by the wrong explanations of mere bookworms who have mastered only the latter but have not understood the true import of the Shastras. The true import of the Shastras cannot be learned except from Gyanis, that is, those who have had and live in the direct experience of reality. No one can understand the true spirit behind any of the Shastras merely by his command over language or by his keenness and superiority of intellect. We can clarify this point with two examples. Firstly, let us take the Mahavakya that thou art Tattvamasi. We should note the difference between the decision of Sri Bhagwan and that of the learned Pandits with regard to what an aspirant mumukshu should do as soon as he hears these divine and significant words. Having mastered the Shastras, these scholars who lecture on them with their peculiar interpretations to laymen begin to do japa of, that is to repeat the Mahavakyas such as that thou art Tattvamasi, I am Brahma, Aham Brahmasmi, and I am He Soham, or they begin to think, meditate, I am Brahma. They also instruct others to do japa and meditation in the same manner. In place of the former thought, I am a man or jiva, they now have a different thought, I am Brahman. This is nothing but replacing one thought by another. It is not the thought free state of self abidance, not knowing the correct practice which is to be done as soon as the Mahavakyas are thus heard. Repetition, japa of them or meditation, dhyana upon them are performed, but being fully aware that such wrong practices would and could never bestow the experience of true knowledge. Even though practiced for years together, Sri Bhagwan at once puts the aspirant on the right path by instructing him. Thus, since the Shastras proclaim, Thou art that which is called the Supreme, and since that itself always shines as self for one to meditate, I am that and not this, the body, and so on, instead of knowing oneself through the inquiry, what am I, and abiding the self is indeed due to lack of strength of mind. As soon as the Shastra declare, Thou art that, turning his attention self-wards, I am what, who am I, should be the immediate reaction of an aspirant. It is not meant that he should meditate, I am not this body, I am that Brahm. The purpose of the Shastra is saying that Thou art is to make the aspirant turn his attention towards self. Who am I? On the other hand, by turning the Mahavakyas, I am that, I am he, and I am Brahm into japa and meditation, not only is the very purpose of the Shastras defeated, but also the aspirant deprive themselves of the proper benefit they should have obtained from the Shastras. Do they not? When Sri Bhagwan directly takes the aspirant to self attention, is he not truly fulfilling the objective of the Shastras and thus revitalizing them? Can it then be said that he is contradicting them? It certainly cannot. Here is an apt story to illustrate this point. One evening, a young boy went for a stroll with his father. When dusk had almost set in, he beheld a tree trunk from which the branches and leaves had been cut off. He was terrified and screamed, "Oh, father, they see a ghost!" Though his father knew that the truth, that it was just the stem of a tree, he assured the boy, "Oh, that ghost, it cannot do you any harm. I am here and will see to it. Come on." So saying, he led the boy away. On hearing the encouraging words of his father, the boy took them to mean, "My father is stronger than the ghost, and that is why he says that it can do to me no harm." This conclusion of the boy is similar to the understanding of the Pandits about the meaning of the Yoga and Vedanta Shastras. Next morning, while going for a stroll with his teacher along the same path, the boy exclaimed, "Sir, look, there is the ghost. We saw it yesterday also." The teacher pitied him for his ignorance and said, "That is not a ghost." But the boy persisted, "No, sir, my father also saw it yesterday. He even assured me that he would see to it that it could do me no harm. But, sir, you say it is not a ghost at all." Would the teacher yield so easily? He said, "Go near it and see for yourself. I will shine the flashlight on it. If it turns out to be a ghost, I too will see to it." The Shastras are like the words of the father in the story. The father also knew well that it was not a ghost. Similarly, the great sages who gave these Shastras also knew well the absolute truth, that nothing such as the ego, body, or world has ever come into existence at all. The father, knowing that his son was quite unfit to make a closer examination on account of his much frightened state at the time, talked to him as if he were also accepting the existence of the false ghost imagined by his son. Even while talking like that, he was not telling a lie. To allay quickly the fear of his son, he said, "The ghost cannot do you any harm." That was indeed the truth. However, what the teacher told him the next day was the absolute truth. Although The teacher's statement that it was not a ghost seems to contradict the father's statement. Does it not, in fact, lend more support to the objective of the father's statement that the ghost could do the boy no harm by making him see for himself that it was, after all, only the stem of a tree? By thus fulfilling the father's objective, doesn't the statement of the teacher breathe new life into that of the father? Instead of understanding thus, if the boy were to conclude, either my teacher has condemned my father, or my father has told me an outright lie, it would be utterly wrong on his part. Similarly, Sri Bhagwan has neither condemned the Shastras nor shown them to be false, nor have the Shastras stated untruths. If any reader were to come to this mistaken conclusion about Sri Bhagwan, he would be just as much as wrong as would have been the boy in our story. Secondly, in Kevalya, which is a standard of non-dualistic work, Gyan Shastras in Tamil, it is stated, for the Gyani, the fruits of the accumulated past actions which are to bear fruit in future births, Sanchita karma, are burnt up by the fire of knowledge. The good and bad fruits of the actions done in this birth are nullified by their being taken by those of who praise him and blame him respectively, that is, by those who do good or harm to him through thought, word, or deed, and only the remaining third karma, that proportion of the past actions which are to give fruits in this present birth, prarabdha karma, is to be experienced by him for the duration of his body, and it will end only with the death of his body. But Sri Bhagwan gives his verdict to say that Sanchita and Agamya will not adhere to a Jnani, but that Prarabdha does remain to be experienced by him, is only a superficial reply to the questions of others, just as none of the wives will remain unwidowed when the husband dies, so all the three karmas will be extinguished when the doer, the ego, dies. Thus, should you know, it has been pointed out by Sri Bhagwan that the statement of the Gyan Shastras that Prarabdha remains for a Jnani is only a reply to the questions of others. Now, to whom does Sri Bhagwan refer as others? Only to the ignorant, those who are in a similar state of delusion as the boy in our story, who, not being able to grasp that Gyan itself is the Jnani, he is not a human form. See the Jnani, Jnana, the bodiless, as one who has a body, as a body form, that is, as an individual. Such people will be repeatedly asking, how does the Jnani walk? How does he talk? How does he work? And so on and so forth. And for them, it is something new and incomprehensible how at all it is possible to have an existence other than the I am the body identification. Therefore, referring to these people as others, Sri Bhagwan explains that only such a reply has to be given to them. However, to those mature aspirants, mumukshus, who came to him with the courage to know the final truth as it is, since they alone truly belong to him, Sri Bhagwan says, bear the truth without concealing anything. In the second half of the verse, just as none of the wives will remain unwidowed when the husband dies, so all the three karmas will be extinguished when the doer, the ego, dies. Thus, should you know, if a man has three wives and dies, all the three wives will be widowed. None of them will be missed out. Similarly, as soon as one who has done the karmas, that is, sense of doership, dies in true knowledge, jnana, all the truth, all the fruits of the three karmas come to an end since the experiencer, that is, the sense of experiencership, is no longer alive. How can it then be said that Sri Bhagwan has criticized or contradicted Kevalya? Sri Bhagwan's statement is certainly not a condemnation, since in the first half of the verse he clearly explains the reason why it is so sad in Kevalya. The one supreme thing, Paravastu, assuming the form of various Veda rishis, gave the Shastras to the world according to the development of the people and their part of understanding at the time. Later on, that same supreme thing appears in the form of various Jnana Gurus and makes clear through so many new methods which will suit the intellectual development of the people in that particular age its own supreme truth, which it had already revealed through the Shastras, but which had been twisted and rendered lifelessly by people of perverted intellect who did not properly understand it. In this context, the reader may refer to the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, verse 1 to 3. Reason doesn't contradict but fulfills. No sage has ever come to contradict. Jesus Christ meant the very same thing when he said, I am not come to destroy but to fulfill. The revolutionary teachings of Bhagwan Sri Ramana, who steer clear of all the roundabouts routes in the Shastras and shows the aspirant the direct and easy path, will appear to be a condemnation only in the eyes of those Pandits who are attracted and deluded by the darkness of the vast forest of the Shastras and who never had the benefit of their study but suffer from mere scriptural fanaticism and who use their learning only to show off their skill in intellectual acrobatics on the platforms and to write commentaries in bombastic style on the Shastras in order to earn name and fame. But those sincere aspirants who want to have the real benefit of the Shastras will see the teachings of Bhagwan Sri Ramana as the crestwell adorning the crown of the Shastras, imparting a new life and fresh glory to them. The difference between the mode of teaching of Bhagwan Sri Ramana and that of the Shastras lies in the fundamental outlook given to us, the base from which are to follow their teachings. That is why, whenever aspirant who were practicing sadhanas learned from the Shastras, asking Sri Bhagwan about their sadhanas, which they thought to be real tapas, Sri Bhagwan replied, with the sole intention of changing the fundamental outlook given to them by the Shastras. Those mature disciples who had a sharp and clear intellect were able to grasp at once the intention of the Sadguru and engage themselves in inquiring into their wrong outlook. I am the body, Jiva Bhava. Thus they became intensely still since they no longer made efforts in the sadhanas they had been doing in the name of tapas, and since they stopped asking questions to clear their doubts about them. This stillness was indeed the peace which we often hear described as being the experience of many aspirants newly coming into the presence of Sri Bhagwan. However, only those earnest aspirants who made use of this stillness and dived deep within by attending to self more and more intensely made eternal peace their own. But those who failed to understand that Sri Bhagwan's intention was to change their fundamental outlook were repeatedly raising the same type of questions to clear their doubts about what they had learned from the Shastras, which lent support to their wrong outlook. I am the body, seeing the bewilderment of those who couldn't come to his path and taking pity on them. Even Sri Bhagwan would on some occasions reply to their doubts in the Shastric terminology itself, as if, like the Shastras, he too were accepting the false sense, I am the body, as the base. Therefore, such replies can never be the direct teachings of Bhagwan if one has carefully studied the various books, both in prose and poetry, such as Sri Ramana Gita, Talks with Sri Ramana Maharishi, Day by Day with Bhagwan Maharishi, Gospel, and so on, in which some of the conversations of devotee with Sri Bhagwan were recorded from the early days when it was found that he was not keeping silence and was talking with devotees till the very end of his life. It will now be clear why such questions were asked and why Bhagwan gave such replies. Let us see an incident which will clearly shows the difference between the tapas prescribed by the Shastras and based upon the fundamental outlook I am the body, Jiva Bhava, and the tapas based upon the fundamental outlook of pure existence, Sadbhava, recommended by Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharishi in his teaching Who Am I? Kavyakanta Ganapati Shastri, who was the foremost poet in Sanskrit among the devotees of Sri Bhagwan and who was good at the tapas of existing upon the least quantity of food, once told Sri Bhagwan, it seems to me that just 3 rupees a month are sufficient for us to live. Quick came Sri Bhagwan's retort, when even the body is not necessary for us to live, why then 3 rupees? We must clearly understand the implication underlying this conversation when Ganpati Shastri remarked, for us to live, he meant only for the body to live. It is thus clear that his fundamental outlook was the body is I. When Sri Bhagwan retorted, for us to live, he meant for self to live. It is thus clear that his fundamental outlook was that the pure consciousness, which is devoid of all five sheets, is I. From this conversation, cannot the reader clearly see what each of them experienced as the knowledge of his existence? Is it not evident from this that not only did Sri Bhagwan himself always unshakably remain under all circumstances in his true state, self consciousness, but that he also instructed those devotees who wholly relied upon him against their giving even the least room to the wrong identification I am the body, Dehatma Buddhi. That is why the teaching of Sri Bhagwan has a special greatness of its own with a revolutionary character and shines over the various methods of spiritual practice so far followed by us as the true, unique, clear, and rational one. But some among us, due to lack of Shraddha, often raise the following objection: unless the mind first becomes mature by means of yogic practices and thereby gains strength, will it be fit to take to self inquiry? Will it not wander as thought waves? But in fact, it is not so. Concerning this, Sri Bhagwan has given clear instructions in his prose work, Who Am I?, where he explains if other thoughts arise, see to him whom they arise to me, will be the answer. This me will remind you of the I consciousness, then the mind can return immediately to self attention. Who am I? By repeatedly practicing thus, the strength of the mind to abide in its source increase. The power which the mind derives from other spiritual practices is not that power which is required to abide in its source. Repetition of holy names, japa, meditation, dhyana, concentration on any one of the six yogic centers in the body, the Shat chakras pointed out in Raj Yoga, concentration on a divine effulgence, jyoti or sound, nada. In all these practices, the mind is only made to attend to some alien object as second or third person. The strength of mind acquired by training it to catch hold of any one of the aforesaid alien objects is not the genuine strength of mind, which is favorable of self knowledge. Being unfavorable rather than calling it strength of mind, it would be more appropriate to call it lack of strength of mind. Let us suppose a man buys a cow and for various reasons keeps it tied up in another man's shed for quite some days. When the owner one day tries to bring the cow to its own shed, after it has become accustomed through force of habit, abhyasa, to its former surroundings, will it come to its own place and keep quiet? No, it will run back to the other man's shed. So, any intelligent farmer buying a new cow will train it to remain in its own shed by tying it only there. Similarly, aspirants who have developed mental strength by concentrating on second and third person objects which are other than self struggle and find it difficult even to understand what self tension. Knowing one's own existence is and how to take the feeling of one's own existence as the target, it is often said, let me first gain strength of mind by training it in other practices, and then let me take to self inquiry. But it is the experience of anyone who has trained his mind in other practices over a long period of time that such a mind is still weaker to turn self words than even an ordinary mind untrained in any other practice. Let us take an example the experience of Sri Ganpati Shastri, who is renowned as Ganpati Muni and who is considered to be one of the important disciples of Sri Bhagwan. There was no one who excelled him in doing japa. He had performed japa by the crores. He was even proclaimed by his own disciples to be Mantreshvara, the Lord of Mantras, and he refers to himself as such in Sri Ramana Gita. He had also developed some wonderful mental powers such as Ashuktavitam, the ability to compose extempore verses on any given subject. Yet he often used to say, I can even go to Indraloka and say that what Indra is doing, but I cannot go within and find the source I. Sri Bhagwan himself also remarked on a number of occasions. Ganpati Muni used to say, it is easy for me to send the mind forward, but impossible for me to make it go backward, that is, to turn it inward. I can go forward, that is, towards second and third persons, any distance at any speed, but I find it difficult to take even one step backward, that is, towards the first person. What can we infer from this? The subtle points about the results of japa will be clear only to those who actually take to practicing it with utmost earnestness and sincerity, and not to those who merely argue. Japa will help one to do self inquiry. Sri Ganpati Muni was only who truly immersed himself in the practice of japa for many years and who had best experience of it. So, doesn't his experience clearly prove that what we have said above is correct? In this connection, some ask, when the truth is such, why did Sri Bhagwan says in Who Am I by meditation upon forms of God Murti dhyana, and by repetition of sacred words, mantra japa, thoughts subside more and more, and for the mind which thus gains one pointedness and strength, self inquiry will easily be attained. Therefore, will not self inquiry become easy for those who do japa or dhyana? We should scrutinize deeply what is actually meant in the work. Who am I? Since the perpetually wandering mind expands into innumerable thoughts, each thought becomes extremely weak, just as when an iron chain is given to the restless trunk of an elephant, the elephant will cling fast only to that and will not do any mischief with its trunk. So, if the mind is trained to hold on to any one of the names or forms of God, it will gain one pointedness, that is the strength to cling to one thing only. In this way, the mind merely loses the nature of branching out into many thoughts. There are two kinds of impediments which act as obstacles for the mind to achieve self abidance, and hence, two kinds of strength of mind are essential for overcoming them. The first strength is that which is required to prevent the mind from branching out into innumerable thoughts, though the force of tendencies towards self, sense, objects. The second strength is that which is required to direct the mind towards the first person of self, that is, the strength actually to attend to self by practices such as repetition, japa, and meditation. Only the strength to be free from the first impediment, that is, from the tendencies towards sense objects, is obtained. But for the mind which engages in self attention from the very beginning, both kinds of requisite strength are naturally cultivated. Though through japa and dhyana the mind achieves the strength not to branch out into many thoughts and thereby become weak, it is still dwelling only upon a second person. Thus, the practice of japa or dhyana develops the power of the mind to cling with great attachment only to the second person or another. In this way, the second great impediment, namely the inability to turn the mind from second persons to the first person, is unknowingly increased. Therefore, when such a mind is to turn selfwards, it will find it to be a very difficult task. This is the truth we have to learn from the personal experience of Sri Ganpati Muni. Let us now explain with a simile how acquiring the power of one pointedness of mind through such practices as japa and dhyana becomes a great obstacle of self attention. Let us suppose that a certain man has decided to go by cycle from Tiruvannamalai to Vellore, a town 50 miles north of Tiruvannamalai, but doesn't know the art of cycling. If he trains himself to cycle by practicing alone the road leading to Tirukoilur, a town 20 miles south of Tiruvannamalai, after many hours he will have learned the skill of cycling, but he will now be 20 miles south of Tiruvannamalai, that is 70 miles away from Vellore, his destination. So will he not now have to make far more effort and waste far more time in order to reach Vellore? Instead of this, if he had from the very beginning started to train himself to cycle by practicing alone the road towards Vellore, after the same number of hours he would have travelled 20 miles closer to Vellore. Besides, since he would have learned the skill of cycling by the time, he could have easily completed the remaining 30 miles and reached his destination without undue expenditure of time and effort. What happens when one practices japa and dhyana is similar to what happened when the man practicing cycling alone the road of Tirukoilur. Since the strength acquired through japa and dhyana is cultivated to an opposite direction, that is, towards a second person? Are they not activities which lead one far away from self attention? On the other hand, if one practices self attention from the very beginning, that will be similar to the man starting to practicing cycling along the road to Vellore. Since self attention, which is self inquiry, thus avoids all unnecessary efforts and directly bestows self attainment, Sri Bhagwan has said in verse 4 of Atmavidya, of all paths, this path, self inquiry, is the easiest, and the verse 17, Updesha Undiyar, this is the direct path for all. Since the practice of japa or dhyana prevents the mind from branching out into various thoughts pertaining to sense objects and thereby becoming weak, Sri Bhagwan said, in whom am I, that they give strength to the mind, but he said so, taking into consideration only one benefit, namely that of saving the mind from the calamity of branching out into innumerable thoughts caused by the tendencies towards sense objects. Moreover, the strength mentioned there by Sri Bhagwan is not the strength which is required for self inquiry and which he had mentioned earlier in the work Who Am I, when he wrote, by repeatedly practicing thus the strength of the mind to abide to or dwell in its source increases. It is only a strength to dwell upon an object other than self, that is, upon a second person. Readers should understand that what is pointing out here in this book is that for those who want and strive for only self attainment, this kind of strength obtained through japa and dhyana is nothing but a hindrance. The help towards success in self inquiry, which is derived from japa and dhyana, is similar to the help in reaching Vellore, which is gained by learning cycling along the road Tirukoilur. For just as in the long run, practicing cycling on the road to Tirukoilur may be an indirect aid towards reaching Vellore, so in the long run, practicing japa and dhyana may be an indirect aid towards attaining self. Likewise, the hindrance towards success in self inquiry, which is created by japa and dhyana, is similar to the hindrance which is created by learning cycling along the road to Tirukoilur. For just as practicing cycling on the road to Tirukoilur takes the man far away from his destination, so practicing japa and dhyana hinders one by taking one far away from self. Gaining the power of one pointedness of mind is here compared to gaining skill in the art of cycling. This power of one pointedness is a wonderful weapon which, like a sharp knife, fire, or nuclear power, may do good or harm depending on how it is used. A sharp knife may be used either to kill a person or in surgical operation to save his life. In the same way, fire and nuclear power can be used either for constructive or destructive purposes. Similarly, the power of one pointedness cultivated in one through practices such as japa and dhyana may do one either good or harm. If one is fond of occult powers, siddhis, or sensual pleasures, he can use this power of one pointedness in very subtle and skillful way in order to achieve them, since the power of one pointedness gained through japa and dhyana is only a one pointedness on a second person, that is, since it is an extroverted one pointedness, it will induce the aspirant to proceed only towards the known self only if he has a good discrimination between the eternal and the ephemeral, and if he is then able to change his course from second person attention to first person attention, will such a power of one pointedness lead him to self inquiry, and after long and strenuous efforts, just like the long and strenuous efforts which the man which learned cycling on the road to Tirukoilur had to make in order to travel all the 70 miles to Vellore enable him to gain self-abidance, which is the self-attainment of true knowledge, jnana. However, do we not see that aspirants on the spiritual path who are doing japa and dhyana are generally inclined only towards gaining occult powers, names and fame and other such transitory pleasures? Therefore, we should understand the truth that the powers of one pointedness gained through japa and dhyana is anyway dangerous, and that it would hence be wise to gain the powers of one pointedness by practicing self attention instead from the very beginning. It is, of course, essential to achieve one pointedness of mind even while doing japa and dhyana. It is necessary to make efforts to bring back repeatedly the power of attention, the mind from wandering over other thoughts and to fix it on one thought. The same amount of effort is also needed while practicing self attention in order to bring back the wandering mind and to fix it in our existence consciousness. Thus, in both kind of practice, an earnest effort is needed to obtain one pointedness of mind. When this is so, why should not an aspirant obtain it by practicing self attention, which is free of all danger from the very beginning? The following incident, which happened in the presence of Sri Bhagwan, will cast more light upon this point. After sitting for some time in his presence, a devotee asked Sri Bhagwan, Bhagwan, I am not able to do self inquiry. I find it difficult. Shall I do dhyana instead? All right, replied Sri Bhagwan. Soon afterwards, the devotee left the hall, whereupon Sri Bhagwan turned to those near him and said, he says that self inquiry is difficult for him and that he cannot do it. So he asked me for permission to do dhyana. How can I compel him to do self inquiry when he himself says that he cannot do it? So when he wants to do dhyana, I have to say, all right, he may come tomorrow and say, Bhagwan, my mind doesn't remain in dhyana, so shall I do japa? Again, I will have to say, all right. In the same manner, he will one day complain, my mind doesn't remain quietly in japa. Only my tongue spells the mantra, but my mind wanders on many things. Shall I do worship, puja, recite hymns, stotra, and so on? What else can I do except to say, all right, in reply to each and every complaint? If one is able to make a sincere effort to practice anything, whether recitation of hymns, japa, dhyana, or any other sadhanas, one can, with the same effort, practice self inquiry. All these complaints are made only by those who do not earnestly like to do any sadhana. That is all. What is essential in any sadhana is to try to bring back the running mind and fix it on one thing only. When then should it not be brought back and fixed in self attention? That alone is self inquiry, Atma Vichara. That is all that is to be done. Even in the Bhagavad Gita, it is said, which means by means of an extremely courageous intellect, power of discrimination, make the mind motionless little by little, fix the mind firmly in self Atma and never think of any other thing, which means towards whatever thing the unsteady mind wanders from each thing, pull it back, fix it always in self and makes it firmly abide there. Even concentrating on thoughts such as I am Brahm, which is considered to be the highest form of meditation, has been described by Sri Bhagwan as being due to lack of strength. Therefore, what the mind gains by taking as target second or third person, which are the objects of japa, dhyana, and so on, is not really strength but only weakness. Can a racehorse accustomed to forward gallop by useful in drawing water from wells where a backward movement of the horse is indispensable? No, it will be of no use. Only that practice of self attention, which Sri Bhagwan referred to in Who Am I, when he wrote, by repeatedly practicing thus, the strength of the mind to abide in its source increases, is the right sadhana which will give the mind the real requisite strength. Those aspirants who came to Sri Bhagwan when a mind not already spoiled by being trained towards target other than self, a mind will with no trace of lethargy, with immense eagerness and with a spirit of unquestioning obedience like that of children, directly turned their mind to the practice of self attention in the form of Who am I? As soon as they came to Sri Bhagwan and thereby gained the real requisite strength mentioned above, they were therefore able to proclaim from their own experience, ah, knowing self is the easiest thing. Indeed, it is the easiest, although the inquiry, Who am I, is thus able to give the real strength of mind which is required to gain self knowledge. To say the truth, only self inquiry and not any of the other sadhanas can give this requisite strength. A wrong idea exists and is spreading even among us, the devotees of Sri Bhagwan, that on the path of self inquiry is difficult, while the other methods, japa, dhyana, yoga, and so on, are easy. Let us see how far from true this contention is. Now, what is the opinion of Sri Bhagwan on this subject? Let us turn to his own words. Of all paths, this path is the easiest. This is the direct path for all. Thus, it is clear that Sri Bhagwan's opinion is that this path of self inquiry is not merely the easiest of all paths, but that it is also easiest, the most direct for all aspirants. Some of us, instead of trying to understand why did Sri Bhagwan say so, can there be a justification for his opinion? If so, what is it? Remarks evasively, ah, it is easy only for Bhagwan, but it is difficult for others, and they become disheartened and lose courage. In order not to lose this courage, since it is the Shraddha which alone will secure us the goal, let us try to find the justification in support the opinion of Sri Bhagwan. What do we mean when we say that a thing is difficult or that is easy? In fact, what is difficult and what is easy? That which we do not like, that which we cannot do, that which we do not know, that alone we call difficult, that which we already like, that which we already done, and that which we already know, that alone will be easy. We therefore come to the following conclusion: those experiences which are already within our powers of loving, power of doing, and power of knowing are easy, while those experiences which are already within our power of loving, power of doing, and power of knowing are difficult. This indeed is the correct definition of what is difficult and what is easy. With the definition, let us now see which of those two is easy. The efforts required for the various spiritual practice like japa, dhyana, yoga, and so on, or the effort required for the self inquiry. As we have already said, the efforts made in the paths of japa, dhyana, yoga, and so on are nothing but an attention towards second and third person object, whereas the effort made in the self inquiry taught by Sri Bhagwan is an attention towards the first person. For the practice of japa, dhyana, or any other four yugas, is necessary to use the power of one pointedness of mind on second and third person object, using the mind power in such a way a mere extroversion. But the self inquiry, it is necessary to use the power of one pointedness of mind in attending to focusing on the first person. So, this alone is the real introversion. A little analysis will reveal that for every one of us, even for the most ordinary man, the experiences of loving, doing, and knowing towards the first person are not only inherent but also greater than those and second and third person objects. Let us see how. When we are first told about a name of God, a form of God, one of the various attitudes towards God, the places of the six yogic centers in the body, or such like, all of which require efforts of attention towards a second or third person object, they are new to us, new to know, new to love, and new to do before being kindled in us by others whom we take as our gurus. All those experiences of loving, doing, and knowing were unknown to us. How? Suppose either our parents and some elders have initiated us into some name or form of God or a sacred mantra like Gayatri. Before being initiated, we did not know those mantras, dhyanas, or forms of God. Thus, only after being instructed do we come to know about them. That is, the experience of knowing that there are such mantras, dhyana, and so on is newly acquired by us. In the same way, it is only after hearing from a guru of the greatness, uniqueness, and power of such japas and dhyanas that we gain faith and love for them. This is for us a newly acquired experience of loving. In other words, we did not love them before. Similarly, we have never before done those mantra japas or meditations nor cultivated those feelings of relationship with God. We are not able to do japa properly, to pronounce the mantra in the correct way, to raise or lower the pitch, and to stop at the right place. Only after repeating it many times in the presence of the Guru and after carrying out his corrections and suggestions. This is for us a newly acquired experience of doing. In other words, we had not done it before. The same applies to meditation, pranayama, hatha yoga, raj yoga, and so on. This is not proved that the experiences of loving, doing, and knowing pertaining to all these spiritual practices based upon second and third person objects did not exist for us before but are newly acquired by us. Only the other hand of experiences of loving, doing, and knowing pertaining to the first person and already there inherent in us without the need of their being indulged by others. How? In chapter 2, pages, we have already clearly proved that in everyone the love for oneself is always and naturally far greater than that for second and third person objects. Thus, firstly, the experience of loving oneself is proved to be inherent in us. Secondly, every day in sleep we are able to separate ourselves easily, effortlessly, and naturally from the feeling I am the body, which is not we. This ability of thusing separating ourselves proves that the experience of remaining as self is inherent in us. Thirdly, let us suppose that a person is sitting alone in an absolutely dark room where he cannot see even his body. If someone asks from outside the room, "Is my book near you?" he replies, "I do not know of its existence." But if asked, "Do you exist?" quick comes his reply, "Why, certainly I exist." He is able to know his own existence, but his self light, self consciousness, even when he doesn't have the help of the light, which is necessary to know the existence of second and third person objects. Moreover, since everyone has the experience of the knowledge, I am even in deep sleep, where the body and mind do not exist, it is evident that the knowledge of our own existence is inherent in us. Hari Om Tat Sat.